Yep, just give me 1 second here, Sam, and we'll get it going.
Oh,
All right.
and Russ, let me know if
Nope,
you don't have permissions yet.
I do not have permission, so
should be good to go now.
okay, let's try again. Okay, that looks better. Yeah, you see it okay? Hear me okay?
Yep, looks good to me. We can hear you all right.
Cool. Real quick. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, good to see everybody virtually this morning. And yeah, we'll kind of dive right into our state climate update for the March WCMC meeting. So we'll start kind of with the usual rundown of the water year to date, well, water year through February, and then some of the March numbers up to this point. Got to have some fun in the deep powder at Winter Park last week, so that was a good time. Got to experience the snow and the water firsthand. All right, so we'll first take a look back at the numbers through the end of February, kind of some of those monthly totals and rankings. And this is so this is temperature on this slide, and this is temperature for the water year to date. So at 5 months, October through February. The map shows the rankings over the 129-year historical period. And you can see basically everywhere in the state, it's been warm for the first 5 months of the water year. Most parts of the state have had a top 10 warm start to the water year through the end of February. So statewide, it's the 6th warmest and the warmest start to the water year since 2018. If we break down the months on the right there, basically all the months have been above average except for January, which was closer to average. But December and February especially were much above average. January, if you remember, had the really intense cold snap in the middle of the month, but still didn't really make it an especially cold month because it was warm on either side of that. So that's the temperature, and then precipitation. And the next one here is maybe less notable. So over the 5 months, first 5 months of the water year, you can see most of the state kind of is in that middle of the pack range historically. Southwestern part of the state has been relatively dry, and the areas kind of Grand Junction down into Delta, Montrose, parts of Gunnison County have been drier than average. That's been helped out a bit here in March so far, but that's kind of the one part of the state that's been relatively dry. The southeast corner, Baca County, is well above average, but actually most of that comes from like the very first or second day of the water year in October. In October, where they had like 3 or 4 inches of rain down there that put them above average. We'll see that when we look at the Walsh graphic in a minute. So more recently, it's actually been kind of dry there, but still well above average for the water year. And yeah, you can see kind of the breakdown. November was a dry month. February was a relatively wet month, and we'll look at that here. So this is percent of normal precipitation for February, just the month of February. Western Colorado, you can see, was kind of more in the near average range in those greens, with the exception again of that Mesa, Delta, Montrose County area that was a bit drier than average. But east of the divide was very wet in February. There was the big storm on at the beginning of the month, and then another about a week later. And February is typically not a very wet month on the Eastern Plains. So a couple inches of precip puts it way above average, like we saw this February. And this is in terms of that same data in terms of the rankings. So you can see kind of the Northern Front Range area, Larimer, Weld counties had a record wet February. And most of that was from a single day, from a single storm on February 2nd and 3rd. Like in Fort Collins, we nearly had the wettest February on record from a single day in early February, and then got a little more precip later in the month. So you can see where that was. So most of eastern Colorado was quite wet in February, but again, that's compared to it normally being pretty dry. Mountains and western slope were in the kind of average to above average range as well in February. This is percent of normal precipitation for the entire water year through the end of February. You can see through the end of February, the San Luis Valley still continued to be dry, but March has been quite wet there. Some other dry pockets, most of the rest of the state being near to above average, with well above average there in the like El Paso, Pueblo County area and down in Baca County. So we summarize this with the quadrant charts. This is just for February. This is statewide. So if you aren't familiar with these, it's precipitation along the horizontal axis, temperature along the vertical axis. The normal values are in the kind of thick dash lines here. So if you're in the upper left, it's warm and dry. Upper right is warm and wet. Lower left, cool and dry. Lower right, cool and wet. And so for February statewide, you can see it was well up in that warm and wet quadrant. So well above average temperature, but also well above average precipitation. And that's probably the least populated quadrant historically of the four that you see here. So a bit unusual from that perspective. Here's the same thing for the winter, climatological winter, December, January, February. Is also in that warm and wet quadrant. So 10th warmest winter statewide, and somewhat above average precipitation over that period as well. So that's, you can kind of see where that lays out there. And then here's for the water year to date, or water year through the end of February. So actually then the statewide, it shifts back into that should be water year 2024, not 23, shifts back into the warm and dry quadrant, but not that much, not quite a bit warmer than average, not so much wetter than or drier than average. One thing that our climatologists will note from these figures is that we kind of look at all of these, it's not great to see being close to 1934 in any of these categories, but we'll hope that's not a predictor of what might happen going forward. 1934 is probably the worst climate year in state history, along with like 2012 and 2002. But anyway, we'll hope that's doesn't really mean anything, because it probably doesn't, but it does show up next to that in some of the plots. All right, let's look at where we're at for March so far. This is temperature and departure from average. And you can see most places are not that far from average for March, with the exception of kind of the far eastern plains. Like the far northeast Colorado has been quite a bit warmer than average in March. A few other pockets that were warm. The mountains, especially the northern mountains, relatively cool. And then you can kind of see a mix of other things through the first half of March. More notable in March, though, up to this point, of course, has been the precipitation. This is the month to date precipitation. Well, it's through Sunday morning, actually, not Monday morning, but this didn't really precipitate much on Sunday, so it would look pretty much the same. So this is what it looks like for the precipitation amounts around the state. And you can see the effects of the big storm from last week along the Front Range. Quite a few spots here with over 4 inches of precipitation. And then these are CoCoRaH's observations for the month in here as well. So you can see some of those big numbers in there, 3, 4, 5 inches of liquid for the month, mostly east of the divide along the Front Range and down into southern Colorado. But the San Juans have picked back up a bit in the last week as well. So you can see some heavier amounts there. The one place that has missed out on these recent storms is southeast Colorado in March. And then this is that as the percent of average through Sunday morning. So these are always a little misleading in the middle of the month, in that you can be way above average just because the number of days is not that many, but still, certainly all those Front Range areas with 4, 5, 6 inches of precip will be well above average for the month of March. And you can see most of the state, double the average or so up to this point. Again, with the exception being Southeast Colorado that's missed out on those recent storms. San Luis Valley has been quite wet. If we look, that's well over an inch of precip for March is a very healthy March in the San Luis Valley. We'll just take kind of a quick sidebar to compare the storm last week with a couple of the other big March storms that are probably in people's memories from the last 20 years. So this is precipitation. This is liquid precipitation for the 3 days during the big storm in March of 2003, the really big one back then. And so we can see in that storm, there were big areas, big pockets along the Front Range that had over 6 inches of precipitation. There were some reports of over 7 inches of precipitation from that storm. And we didn't quite get to that level last week, but not that far off in some spots. So that's March 2003. Here was the Pi Day storm in March of 2021. So that was a big one for the Northern Front Range and also for the Northeast Plains, where it was mostly rain, not snow in that storm, but that was very wet. So we can kind of compare back. There's 2003 and then 2021. And then here's last week's storm. So that one was kind of different in the sense that the far eastern plains actually didn't get very much precipitation at all. It really was an upslope storm, kind of limited to the urban corridor and the foothills that got a lot of precipitation from that one. But just kind of walk through there again. So still the March 2003 storm. This one didn't match up to that. But it was up there among the very wet storms. And if you're kind of interested in more stuff on this, I wrote a blog about the forecast of the March 2003 storm and the storm last week. So you can take a look at that if you're interested. And yeah, we've started blogging now, so subscribe to that if you're interested in this stuff. I'll put that link up again at the end. There was one place in the state, though, where the storm last week far exceeded the 2003 storm, and that was in the areas west of Pueblo. So at Canyon City, there's the long-term climate station there had 3.27 inches of liquid in 2 days. So that was the biggest 2-day winter precipitation event, or winter plus March precipitation event that they've ever had there, and a top 10 2-day precipitation event considering the whole year. So that's one area, and there were reports not far away, kind of surrounding Canyon City, that had over almost 5 inches of liquid in this storm. So it was a really big one for that area. It was kind of a mix of rain and snow there as well. Be interested if there's anybody on the call from that area with what it was like last week, because it sounds like it was both a lot of heavy wet snow and also quite a bit of rain. Okay, so we'll take our kind of spin around the state here in terms of stations. I'm going to go through this pretty quick because there's a lot of them are not that exciting to look at right now, but we'll just kind of swing around there and take a look at these. So just to orient you to these graphs, the long-term average is this dashed gray line, thick dashed gray line here. This water year is in black. And then basically all the historical years are in these light gray lines. And then kind of a representative year that was above average for precipitation and below in the blue and the red there. And then green as if it was average from this point forward. So it kind of just gives you a sense of both where we're at in the water year, but also where it could go going forward. So this is Grand Lake, which is pretty much right at the average, just a little bit below for this point in the water year. So that's good news there that's kind of right in that average range. Grand Junction, as I noted earlier, is one of the drier spots, but they picked up some good precipitation in March. So they were lagging behind as of February, but March has been pretty good there so far. So now 87% of average. not too bad. And a lot of their precipitation for the water year tends to come in the summer and fall. So a long way to go. There, we go down to Mesa Verde in Southwest Colorado. That station doesn't have the data from last week's storm yet, and I think they got a good bit of probably close to an inch of precipitation there would be my guess. So that'll bring that up, but still below average. That's one of the parts of the state that does remain dry in the southwest corner there for the water year to date. Alamosa, good, had been lagging behind, but good precipitation in March so far, and is now above average for the water year. Pueblo is one of the wet spots, basically right at 200%, double the average at this point. And you can see the big storm, that's last week's storm, very healthy precipitation totals at Pueblo from that one. We go to Walsh in Southeast Colorado. I mentioned this earlier. You can see it's well above average, 179% of average, but almost all of that comes from the big rain event on October 1st or 2nd, where they had 3 or 4 inches of rain, put them way above average. So it's a little bit misleading because it's actually been kind of dry since then, but for the water year, still well above average in Southeast Colorado. And of course, the vast majority of their precipitation comes in the summer. So things can change a lot there. The conditions as of March in terms of the whole water year, not especially important. Burlington, right, just a tiny bit below average, but really in that average range. Akron, Northeast Colorado, similar, just a little bit above average there. And then if we go to Boulder, you can see that Boulder is another spot that got a ton of precipitation from the storm last week. The heavy wet snow there took them from a little bit below average to 130% of average at this point in the water year. So that's kind of the quick run through some of the stations there. All right, we'll kind of take a look at what that all means then for the current status of drought. That picture is not drought, just another cool picture from the Fraser Valley this past weekend. These clouds were so awesome. I wish I had gotten a time lapse or something, but didn't find a good spot to take that because the clouds are just kind of capping right over the peaks. It was very cool. All right, this is the drought monitor map. This is last week's map, so it does not include the effects of the storm last week in Colorado or anywhere else for that matter. But this is what the map looked like last week. You can kind of see, a lot of places that had bad drought have seen some relief, like southern New Mexico and Iowa are the bad spots there on the map at this point, but New Mexico certainly got some precipitation last week as well. This is what it looked like a year ago, just for reference. So this is when, western Kansas and a lot of Oklahoma, Texas were still in the punishing drought conditions, which, compared to now, those are mostly gone after a wet year since then. Here's the zoom in for Colorado. Again, does not include last week's storm in any of the numbers at this point. The kind of spot in the state with the worst drought conditions as of last week is still the San Luis Valley. Most of that's going back to last summer, which was very dry. But March has been wet. It would not surprise me to see that D2 severe drought category go away in the San Luis Valley this week after another good week of precipitation. I mean, I guess probably some other improvements in western Colorado, southwestern Colorado as well after last week's storm. There's still certainly lingering dryness on the longer term, but in the shorter term, conditions are not looking too bad in those areas. This is the change in the drought monitor since the start of the water year, just for reference. So you can see, San Luis Valley area and some of those mountains surrounding the valley have seen degradations since October. And then a lot of the other mountain areas have seen improvements since October. And we'll see what this looks like next week after the effects of the storm, the most recent storm, are are included. I did not get to update those because they weren't quite ready yet, so we'll skip that in terms of the soil moisture. But just one other kind of thing that I caught my eye as sort of interesting in the data from this last week is the rivers in eastern Colorado where there was substantial rain last week. So this is the South Platte on the left and the Arkansas on the right. And you can see really big jumps in the stream flow from that rain. So you can see the South Platte had kind of really dried out, not too unusual for February, March timeframe, but then you see the big jump from the rain last week, and similarly on the Arkansas. So that's kind of interesting, you know, both from like kind of near to below average up into the above average range from that one event. And then I know the NRCS will get into more details on the reservoir storage. But I think this kind of comparison continues to be a good, you know, reality check on where things stand. So if we look within Colorado here at, for example, Blue Mesa Reservoir, our biggest reservoir in Colorado, remains well above average in terms of storage, mostly from going back to the big snow year last year. So that's in good shape, above average storage for this time of year. And if you look at the other reservoirs around Colorado, relatively small in the grand scheme of things, they all look pretty good. But you go downstream to the big reservoirs, Powell and Meade, and they're not at the historically bad spot that they were a year ago this time, but they're still not in very good shape. So the issues on the Colorado River as a whole certainly have not been resolved from a snowy year or two. So again, better than they were a year ago, but still, below the 10th percentile historically in terms of storage in Powell. And the kind of broader Colorado River Basin has had a pretty good snow year, not as big as last year. But yeah, we'll kind of get some of the stream flow stuff from NRCS, I'm sure, but it's not looking like it's going to be a way above the average year for stream flow in the basin as a whole. All right, we'll take a look at the outlook of where we might be headed going forward. So in the nearer term, this is the 7-day precipitation forecast from NOAA's Weather Prediction Center. And you can see precipitation in the forecast again. And this is for another storm that's going to be coming in around Sunday, Monday timeframe. Probably not as big as the last one, but it's going to bring more snow to the mountains, more rain and snow to the lower elevations. So the pattern's going to stay active here, and this is what that looks like as a comparison to average for this next 7 days. So you can see for the mountain areas, right? This is sort of peak snow accumulation season still, especially in the northern mountains. So getting an inch or two of precipitation in a week is above average, but not way above average. But still good to see there. The farther eastern plains may again miss out on this next storm, but we'll have to see how that plays out as it gets a little bit closer. So we can kind of see this in the ensemble temperature forecast plumes of when that storm is going to come in. So this is temperature. All the individual lines here are different weather prediction model runs. This goes out for 2 weeks. This is at Fort Collins, that looks similar most Eastern Plains areas. So basically warm through the rest of the week for most of the weekend. And then somewhere around Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we'll have some pretty cold air for late March coming in there. So you can see, we'll be well below freezing, a couple of cold days again around there, then going back to warmer, or at least kind of more typical conditions for late March, early April after that. And then if we look at the precipitation, this is the precipitation to go along with that. You can see this storm around the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday timeframe. So probably more snow, certainly more snow in the mountains. Some, precipitation type we'll see at the lower elevations, maybe some combo of rain and snow, although the air mass looks fairly cold coming in. So probably it'd be mostly snow on the Front Range. Still, almost a week out. So the details will come into clearer focus, but the signal's been there for a storm now for a few days around that Sunday, Monday timeframe. Looking out beyond that, or I guess capturing a little bit of that time period and beyond, these are the 8 to 14 day temperature and precipitation outlooks from the CPC. So that cold air mass, like early next week, that's mostly what's reflected in the below average conditions across much of the West, and a tilt toward above average precipitation over that period, again with another another storm system coming in early next week. And then what's going to go on beyond that? Well, it's kind of an interesting spot right now because we're still in the midst of a strong El Nino conditions, very warm conditions in the Pacific, but pretty much all the predictions are for that to very rapidly go away this spring and summer. And so on the left here is the probabilities of being in either El Nino in red or neutral conditions in gray or La Nina in blue. And you can see basically it goes from, well, 100% of El Nino now, because that's what we're in, to most likely neutral conditions by late spring, early summer, and then very high confidence in La Nina by the fall. So maybe late summer into fall, and these are all the individual like forecast models, kind of all show that. So, and these are the probabilities from the CPC. So transition to ENSO neutral by the April through June period, and then La Nina by June through August, and even more likely beyond that. So that will be something that we'll all have to keep an eye on. Just as a reminder, kind of always show this, of what the relationship is between precipitation and El Nino in Colorado. So if it's blue on these maps, then La Nina conditions are wetter. If it's red, then El Nino is wetter. Winter, spring, summer, fall. El Nino summers tend to be wet, and La Nina summers tend to be dry. So if we're going to kind of, I think the spring, we've already had a wet spring in a lot of places, and that looks like it's going to continue. The question mark will be in the summer. Kind of statistically, summer and fall is not great news to go into La Nina. Those do tend to be drier conditions, but it's still a ways out, and we'll have to see. And just a comparison to some other years that went in a similar way from a rapid shift from El Nino in the winter to La Nina by summer and fall, and using kind of these top 5 shifts going from El Nino to La Nina, there's not a whole lot of signal there. So 1998 was slightly wet, 1973 near average. 2016 is the most recent year that did this. That was a very warm and dry summer, but then some other near average summers. So not a ton of signal just from that kind of quick look there. So we shall see what comes down the line. And then these, don't pay too much attention to these. I put them in here just to have them, but these are a little bit old now. The new outlooks will come out on Thursday of this week. So keep an eye out for those to get more updated information. But this is what the April, May, June outlook looked like from last month, with a tilt towards warmer than average conditions across most of the West, but not a real strong tilt here in Colorado. And then precipitation, not much signal or not much confidence for that. But keep an eye out for the new outlooks on Thursday, because that'll give the better, more updated information on where things stand. So I guess a few takeaways. Water year 2024 so far has been very warm across Colorado. So 6th warmest start to the water year. That of course aligns with winter across the United States, it was the warmest winter on record across the United States. We weren't that extreme in Colorado, but it was a very warm winter, and kind of in line with all the global trends toward warming. In terms of precipitation, Southwest Colorado has been dry for the water year, but most of the rest of the state's been in that near normal range. And with this when we include March in there with this big storm, Front Range area will certainly be above average by the time we tally up the numbers at the end of March. the storm last week brought major precipitation to the Front Range and down through down through Colorado Springs, Pueblo, and west of there. Improved the snowpack in a huge way. We'll let NRCS kind of get into the details of the snowpack. But the northern front, both the North Platte and the South Platte and the Arkansas valleys went from below average to way above average from that one storm. More modest improvements in the southern mountains. El Nino is still here. I think it's affecting our spring weather right now, but it won't be here for much longer, with La Nina expected to return by summer or fall. That's probably not good news, but what it means, more specifically, is probably too far out to make a great prediction about at this point. So I think that's all I've got. There's my contact info. So just a couple of updates, logistical updates from our office that probably Becky and Peter have mentioned on the previous meetings, but just in case. We've kind of stopped doing our own monthly webinars because we're doing them on this, and we've figured out we were kind of duplicating a lot of the same material. So people should join this meeting, and we're not doing our own webinars, but we're still doing our monthly summaries. So you can subscribe to those, come out once a month there. And then, like I mentioned, we started blogging. So we're trying to have some fun with this and take some deeper dives into, climate, water issues, whatever, across Colorado. So you can subscribe. It's a different subscription for that, because those we're trying to do about once a week or so. But that's all I've got. Happy to take questions and take a look at anything else if anyone's interested.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Russ. Appreciate it. Appreciate the plug for this meeting as well. People. But any questions for Russ? Looking through.
And I can't see the chat, so if there was anything in there, I'd read it out to me. But
yep. Didn't see anything right now. Well, thanks so much, Russ. Appreciate you being here today. And thanks for that. We'll kick it over to NRCS.
Hey everyone, can you hear me all right?
Yep, can hear you clearly.
Okay, awesome. I'm Nugam Gill. I'm a hydrologist with the Colorado Snow Survey. I'm based out of the data collection office in Lakewood. Brian DeMoncos is the supervisor. He, as you know, he typically gives these presentations, but we've been busy in the field and I'm on the road right now as well. So I'm stepping in, and I apologize for any background noise here. But yeah, let me share my screen. Can you see that? Can't see.
Yep, it's not showing in like presentation mode, but we're seeing your screen.
Is that good?
Yep, there we go. Looks great.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, my headphones aren't working either, so again, apologize for the background noise here. But yeah, so I'm with the data collection office down in Lakewood. And also one other thing, I live in Nederland too. So I've had the joys of working with the latest precip that came through and getting unburied for the last 4 days. So I'm a little out of sorts and on the road. So I apologize for that there. But we're looking pretty good as far as snowpack statewide. We're at 109% of median, as of yesterday. Still about a month out till median peak. So we still have some time to see some changes there. Yeah, and so for the end of February, we were at 96% of median, with the southern basins lagging behind the most. Upper Rio Grande at 86, the combined San Miguel, Dolores, San Juan at 91, Arkansas 91, South Platte 94. And as we know, this recent storm, just improvements all across all major basins there. And this is just a sub-basin view. So we can see, yeah, the San Luis Valley was, northern San Luis Valley was at around 70%. Upper San Juan, not far from median, but near normal at 90. And then we jump ahead to what this last storm just brought through. And yeah, we're now at 109. The South Platte jumped up to 114. Arkansas at 111. So yeah, just a lot of green and blue and improvements across the board there. Took a peek at some of the snow tells, and it looks like a handful of them potentially broke some records or are near record, second and highest and second highest rankings. Bear River, Niwot, just like in the Front Range, Rocky Mountain Park area. With that storm in the outside of Nederland, Eldora, we had about 45 inches and 2.5 inches per hour overnight. It was wild. And then again, just a sub-basin view of that. You can see the northern San Luis Valley is now at 101%, upper San Juan 106. So everything across the board is at a near normal or well above that, with the exception of just a few below. But overall, major improvements there. See here, this was just a week perspective. So before this storm came through, this is March 10th, statewide snowpack, which was at 106%. So we could see all the southern basins were struggling prior to this recent storm cycle. Arkansas at 89, Upper Rio Grande, the lagging behind the most. And this is the sub-basin view prior to the storm, again showing southern Colorado struggling a little bit there. The Arkansas is now at 111% of median. Threw in a couple other stats that kind of compared with this recent storm, like 2003. So yeah, we're well above median there, and still have a couple days until peak. Combined San Miguel, Dolores, Animas, and San Juan are at 103 as of March 18th. Here's the headwaters of the Rio Grande. Roughly 25 days until median peak there. We're in the 49th percentile. Let's see here. Okay, so for precip, we are now at 103%. All basins, well, near normal or at normal, slightly above that, with the Arkansas seeing great improvements at 113, South Platte at 107. Is that background noise okay?
Yep. You're all good.
Thank you. And then just the precip accumulation map for the whole state of Colorado. 104% here. Why is that one? Oh, sorry. So yeah, this is water year to date at 104%. So this one here is our month to date through March 17th, and we are at 215% of normal, with the eastern part of Colorado seeing a lot of benefit from this last storm, and the southern basins, South Platte at 273, Arkansas at 258. Some major improvements there. Here is our 30-day view from February 18th through March 18th. We are at 132% of normal. Again, the eastern part of the state benefiting greatly, ranging from like 200 um, 153 there. There's still a couple basins in the southern part of the state that could see some improvements in Uncompahgre. But overall, like Upper San Juan, Northern San Luis Valley at 148% for this 30-day outlook or perspective. 45 days, we're sitting at 135%, dating back to February 3rd. That's about when that storm cycle started and kind of persisted through February and through now. 60 days dating back to January 19th through March 18th. We're sitting at 117% of normal precipitation, with the lower Arkansas at 159 leading the charge there. And this is just the last week, 285% of normal for the whole state. So. And in the Arkansas, we are at 112% of median, and that is water year to date. 2003 is that purple line in here. So we can see we didn't have quite the same amount of precip, but trending in a similar fashion there. Rio Grande at 92% for precipitation. And South Platte, we are at 105% of median there. So for precip accumulation, so February, we had 3.9 inches last month. So overall, we're seeing an increase in February and March compared to median, the exception of like 2023, just a little below, but overall, it seems to be increasing in those months. March, we're sitting at 2.9 currently, compared to 5.1 in 2023 and 3 inches for median. Reservoir levels, not much change. This is the start of the water year. We started off at 100%, and as Russ mentioned, mainly attributed to our high snowpack last year. So we started off strong there, and we are currently at 100% as of the end of February. So we'll see what this looks like at the end of the month once the numbers are in with the recent storm cycle. But I'm hoping to see, yeah, maybe there could be some improvements with the San Miguel area in the Arkansas. We're currently below normal. This is for the whole, this is a departure for median for the whole state of Colorado. Let's see here. Just gonna skip over this one. Okay, so for reservoir storage, we're sitting pretty well with all reservoirs surpassing last year's values, again, because of the high snowpack last year. So this is for the end of February. Upper Rio Grande reservoir was low. Actually, let me jump back to that. Oh, it was not. Sorry. Some of these were in here from Brian's presentation. Just I'm going to skip over this one as well. So the San Miguel, this one was lagging behind, and we can see the Navajo Reservoir is below median. So again, we'll see how this recent storm can potentially change those numbers at the end of the month here, but that is impacting the overall basin value here. Statewide stream flows at the start of the water year. As we know, it was off to a dry start, with the exception of the headwaters in the center of the map there, but pretty dry start. And recent stream flow forecasts for March 1st are showing statewide of 93%. Still, the Upper Rio Grande combined San Miguel area is below median. So we'll see how that changes with the April 1st forecast. For March 1st, we had 18 out of 81 stations exceeding the 50% forecast value, which is a slight improvement from the February 1st forecast, which had 12 stations. So we'll see if there's any improvements with this recent precipitation, and those numbers will change. But with that dry water year, it's we're just making improvements here slowly but surely. These are the forecast exceedance charts that we have: the San Miguel, Dolores, San Juan on the left here. Again, this is one of the basins that are below, that are forecasted below that 50% exceedance value. And the Upper Rio Grande here on the right. To skip through this as well. Okay, so statewide, yeah, we're sitting at 109% of median. The lowest basin is the Upper Rio Grande at 101%. The highest basin is the South Platte at 114, and also the combined Yampa is just right behind at 113. That overall is a 13% increase since Brian's presentation last month. So overall, these storms in late February through March through now have exceeded expectations, as you could see with all the precip maps and above median values we have at the moment. So that's providing a boost and potential to mitigate the deficit that we started out with at the start of the water year. And in a normal year, Colorado has typically accumulated about 75% of its median annual peak snowpack. Reservoir again at 100% of median, so no change from last presentation. And then statewide precip is at 103%, ranging from 92 to 113 in the Arkansas. And that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Perfect. Looks like we've got a question here from Robert Scott. Go for it.
Sam, thanks for that presentation. At the last night at the Gunnison State of the River meeting, there was some indication that there was a layer of dust on snow. Is there any indications that that may impact runoff this spring?
Yeah, there was mention of that in our most recent WSOR for that region. So that most definitely will impact runoff and increase melt there. But with this new storm, that kind of resets the albedo. So we'll see how long it takes to get back down to that dust layer. Yeah.
Was that layer pretty close to the top? Is that what they were worried about? That dust layer is was near the surface before this last storm?
It was, yeah, it was at the surface. And then we have this new storm total on top. So it's providing a protective layer there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Not seeing any in the chat. Well, thank you so much. I know you're out in the field, so really appreciate you taking the time and giving a presentation to us today.
So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Have a good one. And with that, we will I'll turn it over to Kevin Hauk for the 2024 flood update.
Thanks, Sam. I hope you guys can all hear me okay. I do not have any slides to present. I'm just going to talk to you for the next few minutes regarding the flood outlook. And it's a time of year when we're asked every year to kind of talk about what we see in terms of flood risks moving forward in the season. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about is probably going to build on what Russ presented earlier, because a lot of it can be driven by some of these climate factors. It's worth noting that unlike water supply, the flooding is always very hard to predict ahead of time. If you go back and look at Colorado flood history throughout the years, there are some isolated snowmelt flooding events that you can find, but for the most part, the largest events that we've had throughout Colorado's the past 100 years or so that have resulted in flooding have almost always been rain-induced. And unlike with the snowmelt flooding, where you can look at factors such as how much snow is on the mountain right now and what is the long-term temperature outlook, it's very hard to predict how hard it's going to rain during the flood season. And so at best, we're looking at probabilities. The two indicators I do look at when looking ahead will be how much snow is on the mountain for snowmelt runoff. And I think as you've seen during the past couple presentations, right now it's at best normal or slightly above normal. It's not nearly as high as it was last year. And so that will trend the probabilities for that kind of flooding to go down this spring. And the other thing that I look at is the ENSO phase, which Russ had a few slides on. So, and as he said, we are transitioning from what is right now an El Nino to what is very likely to be a La Nina as we get into the summer season. And Russ showed the impacts that kind of creates a tendency for. And when we get to a La Nina event, it tends to result in lower probabilities for heavy rainfall throughout the state, including on the Eastern Plains, where we often see these heavy rainfalls during the summer. I would, in terms of the snowmelt runoff, I might remind everybody of 3 recent years that we've had that were very high in snowpack. One was 2011 on the northern half of the state. One was in 2019, which is pretty much the entire state. And then the last one was going to be last year in 2023 for the western half of the state. And in all 3 of these, we had extremely high snowfall amounts on the mountains as we went into runoff season. And not one of them resulted in a presidential disaster declaration for flooding. I think all 3 of them, there are going to be stories of isolated instances of flooding. And last year, the ones that you may remember the most would be up in Hayden, down in Dolores, and there were some isolated impacts to CDOT as well in certain locations as a result of the high runoff. But it's worth noting that last year when we went into runoff season, there was a lot of panic about what is this runoff season going to bring for us with all the snow on the mountains. And a lot of attention placed on it through the end of runoff season. And yet the flood declaration that we ended up receiving in the state was not as a result of snowmelt flooding. It was actually as a result of heavy rainfall that we experienced on the high plains just east and south of Denver, where we had, I think, essentially a record wet period in parts of especially Elbert and El Paso counties. And that was the kind of thing that did result in a flood declaration, but could not have been predicted in advance. And so that's the struggle that we face every year when we talk about flood predictions. Now, one other thing that does come into play when we talk about flooding, and it has been one of the bigger factors in our state in recent years, has been the post-wildfire aspect, where we look at areas downstream of major, or excuse me, of large size and high severity wildfires. And we've had quite a few of them, especially in the years 2018 and 2020. I generally, just based on my experience in responding to these events, generally look at a 3-year period following these fires being put out, where I think the areas are at the biggest risk of post-wildfire flooding and debris flooding. We can continue to have problems after that 3-year period. And as an example, the spring fire down in southern Colorado was an event that took place in 2018, which was 6 years ago. And yet it is still just stubbornly hanging on, and we are still seeing problems each year down there. I think given the severity, especially of the East Troublesome and Cameron Peak fires, we might have a higher risk of seeing those hang on a little bit longer than the 3 years. But I want to mention that the last round of large wildfires in the mountains, where we expect to see problems following that, was in the fall of 2020. So we're past our 3-year threshold for all of these. And for the first summer since 2017, we have a situation where we have no 3-year horizons on any recent wildfires. So perhaps this will be the year when the debris flows and burn scar flooding is lower. The thing that I always worry about is if we have any new fires. And I think I have some concerns this year in the southwest part of the state, because there was just an extremely dry fall this year down there. And another thing that I've learned over the years is to never underestimate the importance of fall going into runoff season. When we go in with very dry soils, it can seriously limit the amount of stream flow runoff that we get during runoff season. And if that gets reduced, we could see the risk of wildfires a little bit higher in that area. That's about all I want to say on the flooding aspect, other than I just want to give a reminder about the Colorado Water Conservation Board's flood threat bulletin, which runs from May 1st through September 30th and does provide a daily flood forecast for all areas around the state, including specific forecasts downstream of those recent burn scars. We don't do warnings like the National Weather Service. We just provide a daily forecast in the morning of things to look out for. But our verification metrics have been very good in recent years. So if that's something you're interested in, you can find it at coloradofloodthreat.com. And there also is an option where you can sign up to receive a daily email summarizing the threats for that day. And Sam, I think that's all I'm going to say, and I'd be happy to take any questions or have any discussions with anybody.
Awesome, appreciate it, Kevin. Yeah, anyone have questions for Kevin? And thanks, Robert. I saw you put the link in the chat. Well, doesn't look like anything else in the chat. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Really appreciate you giving us an update for flood today. So really appreciate that. And just wanted to, before we turn it over for member and water provider updates, just wanted to note that for some of you who turned up to the last CWCB board meeting, you may have heard Robert Zapata make a plug for us to have a few people from agricultural groups join the WCMC meetings. So today we have a couple joining in. So for those of you that joined, thank you and welcome. And if you don't mind us asking you to share, if you could provide us with any information on what's most helpful for you to hear, that would be really informational for us as well. So if anyone wants to jump in, I think we've got folks from the Colorado Farm Bureau, Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, and Colorado County. So feel free to jump in if anyone's on. And if not,
Yeah, this is Carlisle Courier from Colorado Farm Bureau. I just thank you for the chance to opportunity to be included in this. It's been very informative and I appreciate the ability to join you. I don't really have any questions at this point, but thank you for the information.
awesome. Well, thanks so much, Carlo. I really appreciate you being on here today. And we can also move on to our other updates. And if folks from any of those organizations just feel like jumping in somewhere in there as well, please feel free. So that too, if any water providers have any updates or any water managers, love to hear from folks from around the state.
Sure, Sam. This is Jordan. I can jump in for Denver Water. Not a ton to report on our end. Our reservoirs are about 83% full right now. Normal for this time of year would be about 79% full. And then our snowpack is a little bit above normal for this time of year as well, in both the South Platte and Colorado River basins. So yeah, just continuing to keep an eye on things, but so far so good.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jordan. Appreciate that.
Hi, this is Katie Garrett with Colorado Springs Utilities. Very similar to Denver, Colorado Springs Utilities reservoirs are also right at 83% of capacity. And our average for this time of year is about 67%. So we're well above average right now for this time of year. Our March 1 forecasts indicate really close to normal yields coming up for 2024. And our demands right now are a little bit less than average going into the irrigation season so far. And I think that's about it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie.
Hi, this is John Orr with City of Thornton. Storage for us is sitting around 79%, which is around average for us going into the runoff season. Consumption right now is year to date is 4.6% above last year. But I think the beautiful snowfall last week will dampen demand a little bit. And we don't anticipate right now any drought restrictions going into the summer, since there's no drought to speak of in the South Platte River Basin. That's what I have.
Thanks so much, John. Appreciate it.
Hi, this is Emily at Northern Water. We, as of March 1st, our total project storage was at 126% of average. Granby is currently the highest was the highest it's ever been on March 1st, but that was partly because of some operational constraints. We had an outage on the that meant we couldn't deliver through the Adams Tunnel for a while. We're currently projected to fill the system this year. And then CBT project deliveries have been 110% of average for the water year so far. Thanks.
So much. Anyone else? Do we have any slope providers on here? Didn't just looking through the chat to see who's joined, but and I think I saw we have Castle Rock Water on as well. folks I'm seeing this may have jumped off. So, last call, anybody else with any updates for us here today? Let's go twice. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate everyone joining here today. And look forward to seeing everybody at the next meeting on April 23rd. So have a great day and look forward to seeing you then. Take care.
Thanks. We'll see you.